ballin', I'm a hooper. I'm so hot, I can't get.
What are your first thoughts on St. Francis University basketball?
I haven't been to that many games this year. I know historically they're really good. It's always fun to watch when you go, but that's about it.
They're a really good team, and they play at heart. The SFU crowd.
Struggle a little bit, but it's not really their fault. Just gotta get a lot of teamwork together, I think.
Maurice Stokes.
Basketball, highly academic, pure GPA. They bring the hustle, not only on the court, but more importantly, to the library, to the classroom. That's what I think about St. Francis basketball.
Maurice Stokes.
Man, the colors assorted. My dunks too exclusive. They ain't fly, they soaring.
He played 3 years in the NBA. Okay, he graduated from here in 1955. He was the second pick in the NBA draft, if you don't count the territorial picks. NBA Rookie of the Year. 3-time NBA All-Star. Okay, he goes into his last game of his final professional season. Okay, 57-58. March of 58. They're in Minneapolis. He needs to win the Rochester Royals need to beat the Minneapolis Lakers to get into the playoffs. They win. Okay, he falls and hits his head in that game. Then they take a bus to Detroit for a playoff game. Beat Minneapolis on a Wednesday. They're playing in Detroit on a Saturday. Falls and hits his head. He's knocked out. Comes back. He plays in that game in Detroit. He's lethargic, really not himself. And then, of course, what happens in the aftermath? They're flying back to Cincinnati for a Sunday game. They lose to Detroit. They're flying back, and the flight back exacerbates the problems with the swelling. So this is a guy that was a 3-time All-NBA performer. He really was the future of the NBA in many ways. I argue in my book that he was the first black star in the league. And it paved the way for Bill Russell, who would follow, of course, Will Chamberlain. Has everything in front of him. One day, the very next day, they fly back to Cincinnati. He lives the rest of his life from March of 1958 until he dies in April of 1970. He spends the rest of his life, 12 years, paralyzed from the neck down. Only able to communicate verbally to those who can really follow, who spend a lot of time with him.
Hey Joe, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about Maurice Stokes and his part here at St. Francis University today.
Yes, I can. We had Maurice Stokes was obviously a huge name in basketball at St. Francis. Probably the best example that I had personally with him was I was actually here last summer, working in the middle of the summer, and was walking through the hallway and down by the shrine, the exhibit that we have for Maurice downstairs. There was an elderly couple standing out there, and the elderly couple was driving through on the turnpike, and the woman had gone to school with Maurice, and so she had gone to school with him not long ago, and she hadn't been back to campus in probably 30 years. She brought her husband up just to visit the gym, just to look around, show kind of her husband where St. Francis was, who Maurice Stokes was. So I thought, beyond basketball, his life touched people on campus. And for some woman to remember that 30, 40 years later, to kind of make a pilgrimage back up here, just to walk in the gym, I thought was pretty impressive.
What is Maurice Stokes' influence on St. Francis University basketball?
The first thing is when you walk into the building that is named after Maurice Stokes, you see his Hall of Fame jacket. The legacy that he left on the basketball court, his numbers speak for that. But what he did as a person, I think as you walk around this campus and see his name on buildings and in pictures, his impact is still felt today. And the goals of Franciscan education, I think he would embody all of them 50 years later. Obviously, walking around the building, you see his name quite a bit, and they understand the history and the story of Maurice Stokes. Anytime you see a number retired up in the rafters as a player, you know that he had an impact on the basketball program. And they understand the story of him as a person as well, and they should. It's a big part of our tradition and our history here at St. Francis.
And what influence do you think Maurice Stokes has on the general student population at St. Francis University?
Hopefully hopefully they understand his story, because, as I said before, he had an impact not only on the basketball court, but on the community. When he was a basketball player here, and then when he left to play professionally, and obviously the story of his tragic accident, the impact he had after the accident, and the difficulties he faced, he was still able to impact people back here at St. Francis.
If you could sum up St. Francis University basketball in as few words as possible, what would they be?
Tradition, there is an expectation for excellence, and the impact that they could have on a community is still great, even 50 years after Maurice Stokes left St. Francis.
St. Francis University basketball in as few words as possible, what would it be?
Family. Maurice really helped open the door to not only the black student athlete thinking about St. Francis, but black students. And of course, Skip Hughes, his coach, I think any conversation about Maurice's impact, Skip Hughes has to be mentioned prominently. He was a dentist in Hollidaysburg, the part-time men's basketball coach at the time. Hughes had the foresight. Maurice attended Westinghouse High School in Pittsburgh, and there was another African-American player on that team by the name of Eugene Phelps. And Phelps was a good player in his own right, but Coach Hughes had the foresight to bring Phelps in a semester before Maurice enrolled at St. Francis to try to make that a more seamless acclimation. So I think in terms of diversity on campus, I think that we still have a long ways to go, but Maurice certainly helped pave the way with regards to that, and also opening the door for African Americans, generally speaking. At the professional level, NBA was the last of the professional leagues to integrate, to allow African Americans to compete in the league. He was also one of the pioneers on that front. One of his teammates at Westinghouse High School, Chuck Cooper, was the first African American drafted into the league, and Chuck was a significant influence on Maurice. So I think even on the NBA level, it was a big deal. In terms of other impacts that he made on St. Francis, he absolutely, without question, put our men's basketball program on the map. St. Francis competed at the quote-unquote major level in college men's basketball, but they were a down-the-line team. They really hadn't made a national splash. Maurice came in, and he was one of the first freshmen, early 1950s. He was among the first groups of freshmen that were eligible to play right away. Previously, you had players who played 3 years on the varsity. So Maurice played 4 years on the varsity. He took us to the National Catholic Invitational Tournament as a freshman, led the team in scoring as a freshman. Only a few players at St. Francis have done that. His second year, they went back to they were not invited to a bid. And part of the reason for that was teams weren't interested in scheduling St. Francis. They saw this 6'7" powerhouse out of Pittsburgh, and they said, you know, we can't afford to have our reputation damaged by losing to a St. Francis. So the second year, schedule was very condensed, and they didn't play a lot. Junior and senior year, he took us to the tournament at the time. Today, of course, it's March Madness that everyone gets excited about in March. Then it was the National Invitation Tournament. It had more prestige. Maurice took us to the National Invitation Tournament in 1953-54 as a junior. St. Francis split. Beat Brigham Young, lost to Duquesne, and he also in just 2 games was named to the NIT tournament team, only one of 5 players. And then his senior year took St. Francis to the Final Four.
What are your first thoughts on Maurice Stokes?
He's a really good basketball player. I visited his grave a few times down in the graveyard, and that's about it.
The gym.
Legendary.
Basically, I think of the gym because it's named after Maurice Stokes. I know he was a really good basketball player for our school. And I also had class with someone who I think is related to him. She plays here at St. Francis now. Basketball.
Stokes.
Basketball.
The athletic building.
Great player.
Basketball play.